Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We hope you're keeping very safe and well. Thank you so much for joining us during what is still an international break for the next couple of days. Delighted to have returning guests with me on the Last Word on Spurs. And of course, always a great addition. We have the wonderful Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust joining us. But first up, making his debut this season on the Last Word on Spurs. It's been a while. I've got one of my great friends back, the wonderful John Wenham over at Lilywhite Rose. John, how are you? You well?
Hey Rick, yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you. Pleasure to be on. It's been a while, and I'm looking forward to getting into it tonight. We've got a really interesting discussion to be had.
We have indeed. We have indeed. Now, listen, we always love having these guys on, even more so. I think it's fair to say they've been very, very busy over the course of these last couple of weeks. But when are these guys not busy? You know, it's always great to catch up. First up, we've got the great Martin Cloake, one of the co-chairs, of course, at the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust. Martin, how are you? Family all keeping well?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, good to be back on.
Quiet, Martin. Been a quiet over the last couple of weeks. Quiet, always quiet, isn't it? Doesn't always pick up, does it?
Not much happening, really. Not much to think about. Been very relaxing. So, you know.
Oh, dear.
I'm not really.
Well, I think what we might do just for the benefit of Martin's audio is just for the moment we're just gonna just currently put Martin's camera on hold for the moment. I'm going to come round to also the co-chair of the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust. We've got Katrina Law joining us. Kat, how are you? Family well? All good?
I'm all right, thank you, Ricky. I'm a bit disappointed when you said an international break because I haven't had an international break for about 2 years.
Join the club here, Kat. I'm still waiting for mine, I tell you.
Mate, I know, it's terrible. But apart from a lack of abroad action, it's not too bad. Same old, Brilliant. Same old. Never a dull moment.
Same old, same old. Tottenham keeping you busy as always, Kat. Always keeping you busy. And keeping us busy as well over, of the course of the last couple of weeks. Listen, we are going to start with Martin. Martin, we're going to see how this goes. At the moment, we've still got you on camera, but we'll see how it goes in terms of the connection here. Our thanks to, all the internet providers for making it a really tricky week so far. My broadband was down yesterday. It's Martin's turn today. Hopefully, it's not a catching thing here, and if we can try and complete the show without any interruptions. Martin, on the 27th of September, THST invited the executive board of Tottenham Hotspur to meet with the board of Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust to discuss some of the strategic questions which the trust members and other fans had been looking to answer for quite some time. I think it's fair to say, this is what you obviously put in your statement, that the request was not made on the back of just a few poor results, but after 2 years of real questionable decision-making and an apparent drift. The club board, as we saw, and it was made public, they declined to meet with the trust board. Have you been given an explanation by the board of why they actually declined to meet with yourselves?
Not really. I mean, they said, first of all, that they were surprised that we wanted to talk about on-field, because we've always said that our remit isn't on-field, and we hadn't actually said we wanted to talk about on-field. We said we wanted to talk about medium to long-term strategy. It took about 9 days before a reply came back, so it's kind of fairly clear what the direction of travel was, and they just basically said that they didn't feel that a meeting was necessary because their focus is and always has been success on the pitch. So that's where we are.
Kat, as you stressed in your recent statement, it does not mean these questions are no longer relevant. What it does mean is that you now have to ask in public the questions which you would have asked at the meeting. You asked the club to clarify its strategy when it went 2 consecutive transfer windows without signing a player when Mauricio Pochettino was sacked. The fans of this club deserve to hear the answers to these questions. Therefore, how frustrated are you by the fact that the board did not even accept to agree to this meeting, even if they weren't able to answer all the questions you had wanted them answered?
Yeah, thanks, John. I mean, I think first it's important to stress that these are questions that are being asked by trust members and by other sections of the general fan base. So it's not just about Kat and Martin or about the trust board being frustrated. Fans are key stakeholders in the club, and they've got every right to question the board and the owners and to be kept informed as to strategy and plans for the club. So declining to meet wasn't just a disappointment to the trust. It should have been a disappointment to all of the fans who were feeling a little bit unsure about the direction of travel at the club at the moment. I think it's fair to say there's a sense of disconnect, and let's be honest, the pandemic hasn't really helped with that. So we wanted to give the board of Tottenham an opportunity to explain their plans and to maybe reassure a little. I think this just highlights the issues that are brought up with what we would term grace and favour relationships. So our role is always to ask the hard questions and to hold a mirror up to the board. That isn't always well received. I think it's fair to say that the board don't particularly like that. I mean, I'll be honest, I wouldn't particularly like that either, but that's our job. We're there to be a critical friend and to ask the difficult questions. I think the issue is that without a formal framework in place, they can turn the tap off at will. So we would have hoped that we do hope that they'll still acknowledge and they'll still address the questions. Although I think it's pretty clear that that won't be in the format of a meeting with us. But let's hope that we put the questions out there, that they will realise that they are valid and reasonable questions for fans who are key stakeholders in the club after all to ask. And let's hope over the next few weeks and months, we'll see some answer to that coming out.
Okay, and obviously I know I've got there's a list of the questions here, and I say for the benefit of our listeners, for the audience that are watching here, thank you so much. I mean, you can go on to the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust website if you want to go and look at all the questions in detail. But just to pick out a few that you asked, you know, one of them, number one, for example, there's a widespread feeling of a lack of direction at the club. You know, you've asked, what is your vision for Tottenham? What are your objectives and how are you measuring progress against those objectives? Where do you want the club to be in 5 years' time? On and off the pitch, can you give an update on stadium naming rights? Could you give us a clear explanation of the relationship between different parts of the business and how resources are used across them? Do you feel, Kat, in a way, just to not have at least an acknowledgement or an answer to some of those questions rather than all, is that the most disappointing thing, to not at least have some form of an acknowledgement to those questions?
I don't think it's necessarily surprising, because I think there were some tough questions in there. So knowing the club and the board as I do, I would suspect they have answers to some of them, but not to all of them. But if they now think that fans are going to ask for those, maybe that's something that they can up their game in and maybe prepare. So look, it's always disappointing when club communications with supporters aren't as strong as they could be. I think there tends to be a bit of nervousness from executive level of clubs as to how much information they give away, how trustworthy fans can be. If you give them some answers, they're going to want, you know, loads more answers. I think time and time again, our fan base, our trust members and the trust board have proved that they understand commercial sensitivities and our interests are also the best interests of the club. We're not trying to catch people out or trick people up here. There's a genuine issue at the moment. I'm not even saying that it's a majority view, but it's growing stronger. It's bubbling under at the moment that there are concerns about the way that the club is focused and the way that the club is moving forwards. And it would just, for me, be nice for the club to acknowledge that. It's not even about, you know, basically calling people out. It's giving them an opportunity to address those issues. And then once the fans have got the information and the fans have had some kind of response from the club, they can make their own judgment, can't they? You know, so let's see what happens. I haven't given up hope that they won't address some of this. I just don't think that they'll address it through a normal channel of a board-to-board meeting with the trust. And hey, that's okay. That's absolutely fine, as long as the information is put out and the fans are able to understand what their plans are, long, short, medium term for the club.
Before John does come in, Martin, I'll just ask you a quick question. Like I said there to Kat, you know, the level of questions you've asked them, maybe because of the nature of some of those, they don't want to go into dialogue. Are you also disappointed by the fact there's just not been an acknowledgement as to answer some of those questions, if not all? You can understand, for example, I'll give you an example, maybe with the question around the stadium naming rights, the club could be, again, I don't know this at all, but they may be already in negotiations with somebody. Therefore, they wouldn't want to comment on a situation where it might be delicate and they're in the process of tying up a deal there. Can you understand why, you know, there hasn't been an answer to at least some of the questions you've put towards them, which I think in some way, I'm not saying that would go a long way to making everybody love ENIC again, but it would at least give some fans confidence and some reassurance that there is some sense of a direction of where the club is going to.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think there's often a misunderstanding. And I think that sometimes it's a willful misunderstanding of what the questions are that are being asked and why they're being asked. I don't think anybody, and we certainly wouldn't, but I don't think anybody reasonable would suggest that every single detail of every single thing that's going on should be made public by the club. We want to know everything. We want to have a veto over everything. And that's what we've been accused of looking for by some quite well-known figures in the game, as well as by ordinary fans as well. We're not looking for that level of detail at all. What we're looking for is a general update. Now, sometimes, of course, we're looking for a little bit more detail on something, but with something like the stadium naming rights, fans are asking that question. They're saying, well, hold on a minute, we're 3 years into this now. Is there an issue there? Have we lost out by holding out for more money? If that's what we're doing, have we lost out? Can we have a general idea of the strategy? And again, answering questions about the football strategy and success on the pitch, of course, they can't say, well, what our plan is to sign these 3 players, put them in these positions, win this number of games, get this number of points, and then win this trophy. Nobody's expecting that as well. But at the moment, there does seem to be this sense of drift. That on the one hand, we hear about a return to DNA, and then, there's maybe a different approach. We had, the appointment of Mourinho was embracing a pretty different style to the sort of thing that had been put in place by Pochettino. That wasn't explained either. So people aren't looking for detail. And I get a little bit tired sometimes of seeing some of the criticism where people say, these people want to know everything. They want to have a finger in every pie. They want to have an influence on every decision. That's not the case at all. And we've always said that there are paid professionals there that are running football clubs who know what they're doing. You've got a greater level of expertise. And we've always had the joke, good job we weren't running a club, because think of the decisions we would have made. And I think all 4 of us could probably have said that over the years, as could many other fans as well. But what we're looking for is a bit of general information and a bit of respect for supporters as well. And it does come back to this thing that football isn't just any other business. It's the old cliche. If you don't like what you see in Tesco's, you go to Sainsbury's. But as much as we don't like what we see at Spurs, we're not going to get a season ticket at the Arsenal. So with that customer loyalty and the amount of money and the amount of brand exposure that can come with that, I would say that there is a responsibility for a football club to say, well, we're going to give you a little bit more information about the way we're thinking about what our approach is. And of course, some people won't be happy with that. But I think at the moment, people are saying, well, we're not really quite sure what we are as a business, as a football club. We're not sure what direction we're going in. We'd like a few more answers, if you don't mind, to some of those questions. Nobody's expecting them to reveal the intimate details of a contract over stadium naming rights, but they want to hear about a direction of travel. And I don't think that's unreasonable. And I think, if you're somebody that does think that's unreasonable, we're probably not going to convince you. But we've made the case for why it is.
Martin, as we know, it was your intention to provide the club's board with an opportunity to explain its short, medium and long-term plans, as you've just said, and to furnish the fan base with sufficient information to make an educated assessment of the current situation and the direction of travel for the club. You would have hoped that information would still be forthcoming, based that we haven't got these answers as yet. Do you see any way forward under this current ownership?
I think there's a few questions tied up in there, but look, the current ownership is the current ownership. So that's the situation we're dealing with. I kind of share, Kat's attitude that she said earlier, that we would hope that through whatever forum, they would improve their communication with the fans. They would be a little bit more open. And that's it. The current ownership is what we've got. And I know, the elephant in the room in this conversation is, what about new buyers? Should you be signed to let it go? We've always said there is no point calling for a change for the sake of it if there's nothing there. Okay, what we would like is the people that are running the club to do a better job of it, to be a little bit more open as well, about the way that they're doing things, about what their targets are as well. And some people will say, well, you've got a bloody cheek, haven't you, to do that? But again, I go back to what I said before. There's that unique relationship between fans and the club. So, it's not great not feeling that proud of your club. It's not great seeing your club criticized. It's not great hearing your own club's fans arguing among themselves and arguing and having a go at the board as well. And it's not naff to say it, but we do all want success for the club. We want the same thing. This is supposed to be pleasure. It's what we do to get away from all this stuff. We get away from work as well. So we don't want the conflict, and we don't want the doubt and the disillusion. But there is a lot of doubt and disillusion out there. You could say it's easy to say things, and it is easy to say things, but I've talked to some people who I've been very, very surprised, who've said, you know what, I think this might be the last season for me. I think that might be it for me as well. And maybe in the great business plan, that doesn't matter, because maybe the club thinks, look, we'll get some other fans as well. But I think that matters. I think it matters that people have got a connection to this club. This club means so much to so many people. And the club takes advantage of that. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. They recognise how influential a football club is and how it can change people's lives as well. But that's why people think it's important. So, is there a way forward under the current ownership? I obviously hope there is, because that's the ownership that we've got. And I want our football club to go forward, and I want it to succeed. And I want to feel, one of the great things about the Pochettino years, and people say, oh, here we go again, but we didn't win anything. But didn't it feel great to be part of this football club during those years as well? Of course, I was gutted that we didn't win anything. I was gutted at Stamford Bridge at that game. I was gutted when we were in Madrid as well. But we felt as if we were part of something, and it was something to be proud of. And that's a great feeling.
Yeah, I just think what you said there, Martin, I just think at that time we had hope. And I'm not saying we haven't got any hope now, but, Lee goes on about this a lot on the show. And I know he often refers to it, and I have to again bring up what Lee said at that time, was that, under Pochettino, we had a plan. We knew what we were trying to do. We were trying to build that training ground. We were trying to build that stadium. And we were trying to have a team competitive that would not only get into the Champions League, but actually go for titles. This is what Pochettino always said. We were always frustrated by the fact that we didn't take maybe the League Cup and the FA Cup too seriously. But Pochettino had, ideas and dreams of bigger things like that, like the Premier League, like the Champions League. And we actually were seeing it in front of us. We got to a Champions League final, and we were competing for the title on a number of occasions. And like you say there, it's just, I just think where we are right now, I don't think if you asked any fan that guy goes every week, you guys are season ticket holders as well, John, nobody can actually tell you what is the current direction. What are we trying to achieve or establish right now? And I think that is that's the hardest thing, I think, at the moment, because if you're working towards something, then we can be patient. I've said this before so many times that, if you're a Spurs fan, you're not here for the trophies, because we haven't had them in such a long time. You aren't here for the trophies. You're here for, you are here to see, I think, a brand of football that's going to entertain you. It's going to excite you. You're here to see flair players, because that's what it's like growing up with Spurs. I used to say to my dad all the time, why are you putting me through this? But, he still tells me the good times are going to come back, and I believe him. I just hope they will come back sometime soon, because, my God, it's this painful rebuild. It can be excruciating, to say the least. But, Kat, coming over to you, as you said, and as you guys pointed out in your recent statement, sharing strategic visions and objectives is not unusual in football. It's a commonplace in business. We know with several clubs, the likes of Liverpool, we've seen Everton, Celtic, Rangers, alongside the Football Association, having published plans and reports readily available to view. Therefore, are you surprised on that basis with the club, given the situation over a 72-day search for a manager, what we've gone through in terms of Pochettino to Mourinho, that the club would not have least wanted to give you at least something, just to give us as fans something to hold on to, that we have got some vision, some identity of where this club is trying to go?
I'm not massively surprised. No, to be honest with you. I think the club's overarching attitude has always been, well, why say anything when you can say nothing? So we've tried to work with them on that and to improve their communications with supporters. Maybe it isn't an easy answer to give on things like that. I don't know. But I actually think that some of our fan base don't particularly help here either. Like, I'm involved with the trust because I massively believe in empowering fans. And as Martin said earlier, football is a business, but it's a business like no other. Fans are intrinsically involved in the success and survival of their clubs. And when we as fans collectively believe something strongly enough, when we act with confidence, with conviction, when we all come together, we're virtually unstoppable. So we look at the furlough, we look at the pay-per-view, we look at the European Super League. All of that came about through fan action and fan power and fans coming together. Fans who don't believe that others have the right to question their owners and directors and to hold their feet to the fire and to make them accountable for decisions effectively undermine everyone else. So my message would be, for once, please can we come together on this? Every fan has the right to have answers to these questions. So that's just my little gripe that I'll get off my chest. I'm all for empowering, not for belittling. As I said earlier, I'm still hopeful that by us raising those questions publicly, the club will at least have to sit down and consider why fans are asking them and how they're going to address them. It's early days, that we only went public, or they only declined a few days ago.
Yeah.
I'm not expecting them to knee jerk and produce all this stuff, as Martin said. I also don't think they particularly want to do anything immediately, because it looks like we poked them into doing it then. So, you know, let's just see. Let's just leave it a couple of weeks and see what comes out. But I would still expect them to address some of those questions, yes.
Before John just jumps in there, Kat, can I ask you? You say fans coming together. What can, if for fans watching this, listening to this right now, what can they do? What can they do to make that difference, in your opinion? How can we come together as one to really change?
I think social media is great for certain things, and I think it's an absolute toxic cesspit for other things. And it's quite disheartening when you're trying to do something in the best interest of the club, the best interest of the fans, I should say, which hopefully is in the best interest of the club, and people shoot you down without any information or without knowing. So if you agree with what we're saying and you believe that fans have the right to question their owners and their directors, when you see people talking down and poo-pooing on Twitter or on social media, stick up for us, stick up for yourselves. Join the trust, obviously. Email us, email the club. You can email supporterservices@tottenhamhotspur.com and just say, look, guys, we actually do want to know the answers to these questions. It's not just the trust and their members. So you can always do that. There's always an open line there to us or to the club, and on social media. Just stand up for what you believe in. Don't let people talk down at you, basically.
Okay, also, just a question on the screen there. I don't know if you can see that. I mean, just for our listeners on audio, this is from Cody Mack, who says, are the people involved with the trust beginning to feel disillusioned by the way the club is treating the trust? Has the trust lost its place in the THFC ecosystem? Kat, Martin, if you want to answer that one at all?
Do you want me to start, Martin? Do you want to do it?
I don't mind. I'll take that. I mean, we'd feel disillusioned at various different stages. You know, when things aren't going well. You know, we're volunteers. We're trying to do this because we think it matters, and if it doesn't go well, you're not going to feel great about it. Have we lost our place in the ecosystem? Well, we'll come on to this later. I mean, the ecosystem might be changing, really. I mean, I think, you know, the sentence that stuck with me over the past week is fans don't get to choose their owners. And that's a problem, because I think fans should have a say in who their owners are. So, you know, I've probably been permanently disillusioned with the way football and football clubs have been run for the best part of the last 30 years, if you want to look at it on a governance level. And in a way, it's nothing new. But, you know, that there is this kind of increasing gap between those at the top and those at the bottom. And I think if there's a disillusion, it's the worry. And I think this fueled a lot of the anger about the European Super League. It's a worry that the gap between the people at the top and the rest is going. And so competitiveness is being pushed out the window. And people like that. They like the romance and the idea that, you know, when you start a season, anybody could win a trophy. And, you know, I've used the example before that, you know, when I was a kid, I remember Nottingham Forest winning the second division, winning the first division, and winning the European Cup in consecutive years. Now that wasn't my team. And it wasn't a particularly attractive team to watch either, but he had a great manager who made the best of what he had. But that was the magic of football, and people want to see that. So, you know, in terms of disillusion, I think it's that there is a disillusion which a lot of us have got with the way that the game might be going, and we're trying to hold on to the things that we think are important. And I think that's the great folly of a lot of people running a game. They don't recognize the value of what they've got, and the value is the genuine competitiveness. It's not, you know, who's got the most money and can blow everybody else out of the water and win every game. And of course every fan would like that. It wouldn't be great to win every game you play, but then after a while would you start getting a bit bored with that, you know? And people are probably going in comments now, it'd take me a few years, mate. But you know,
for like Tottenham, would it? It would just win for like Tottenham winning every game. That would just be bizarre.
Absolutely. So look, yes, you get disillusioned, but look, then people just go, well, you know, boo-hoo, poor you. It was never going to be easy with this club, or probably with any club, but maybe with this club, kind of in the top 10 most difficult to deal with. Let's put it that way. So it's never going to be easy, and we sort of knew what we were getting ourselves into. I say sort of because you never know entirely. It's not great when it doesn't go well, but it's still the right thing to do. And, you know, I just echo what Kat said before, that I think the most disillusioning thing is when you hear fans saying, why should we be told anything? Why, you know, we haven't got any rights. We haven't got this. Like, yes, you have. Yes, you have. You're important, you know.
Guys, a quick one. Sorry, John, but we're going to bring you, John, for 1 second. Just that question on the screen there, sorry, from Sean Hurl. Does anyone want to take that one there? He says it's amazing that the club released that video with Paratici just after the request from the trust. Is that purely coincidence, guys? Very quickly on that.
Of course it was, Ricky. Of course it was. Look, no, I don't for 1 minute believe that. I think they're starting a rhythm with those videos. And I think from what I've seen on social media, people appreciate them and they enjoy the content. So I'm all for that. That's great. Do more of that. Do more of that stuff. That's absolutely fine. I think it probably was a coincidence. But look, whatever route gets them to say.
That's one of those. That's one of those brilliant things, isn't it?
Oh, lost Martin.
I was just going to say that it's one of those kind of classic things that you know, we could say, yeah, it was because of us, and then people will say, oh well, that was going to happen anyway, so you didn't know. So anything good that happens was always going to happen anyway, and when it doesn't happen, it's our fault. So I think that's the way it works, isn't it?
Totally agree.
Martin, you say that you know, we are key stakeholders as supporters, and I certainly believe that view as well. And we have sort of every right to ask these questions, to expect a level of transparency, and to hold directors accountable for their decision making. You hope the club's board takes this opportunity to address fan concerns and to share their future plans for Spurs. Do you honestly see them going back on the decision and reaching back out to you guys and arranging a meeting to address these concerns?
I don't think there's much to add to what's been said before. I mean, look, you know, we hope they do. I think if we're honest, when the trust in its current incarnation started knocking on the door, they didn't particularly want to meet us then. But I think they were persuaded that it was a good idea. Now, there are various views about why they might have thought that was a good idea. We like to think it's because we armed ourselves with the information so that we weren't going to waste their time when we went in. You know, we were going to approach it from an informed point of view. We were going to approach it from a pragmatic point of view. We weren't going to do the shouting and hollering. If there was a disagreement, we were going to try and have that disagreement honestly and, you know, robustly if we needed to. And I like to think that we persuaded them that it was worth talking to us because we dealt with things in a proper manner. Now, some people have said you've been too soft or whatever. You know, there's probably another debate about that. So what I hope would happen is as happened 8 or 9 years ago when they didn't really want to meet us, but then they decided actually this might be a good idea. They actually realise, you know, over the next few weeks or months that it's probably a good idea to sit down and meet with us and to meet with other sections of support as well. Now, what might change that, and I know we'll come on to this later, is this review, this fan-led review, which is being chaired by Tracy Crouch, the MP, and it is part of a government commitment. So that might change the landscape and it might change the structure. But, you know, there's no reason why you have to wait for legislation or a government recommendation. You know, if you think it's a good idea, why not create? And we've had this conversation with the club. Why not create the best fan engagement model? You know, the club likes to be the world lead. Anything it does, you know, even if it's like producing a bag of chips, it's the world leading bag of chips or whatever. And there I go talking about chips again. So that's going to cause another social media storm, isn't it? But, you know, why not try and do that? Why not have the best fan engagement model that's there and let that be the benchmark for the rest of football and say, people, we want to be like Spurs. That's what we all want, isn't it? You know, that's great. And of course it's arrogant, but we're football fans, so we're arrogant. We want the best for our club.
I totally agree. No, you're right. We all do. I think it's fair to say, you know, to all the questions what many supporters have been asking for clarity on for such a long time. You know, you look at it and I think there's a case that I'm not saying it would have done, Kat, this is to you. It may have got supporters back on side, but can you tell us what the current relationship is like between yourselves and the club, given that they've now declined to meet with yourselves for this meeting that you've called?
Yeah, I mean, our working relationship with senior executives and heads of department at the club remains as strong as ever. It's just our relationship with the club board that's clearly not that strong right now. I think it's important to stress that at the trust, we cover a multitude of work streams. So ticketing, safety, stewarding, travel, catering, charitable work, community work, etc. And all of those are continuing. And included in some of that are joint initiatives with the club. So, for example, we have a joint food bank initiative. So if you go to the stadium on a match day now, opposite the shop, they've got some like tethered like banners, and it's got our crest on it and the club's crest on it. And so, you know, we're still working jointly on stuff like the food banks. The thing that isn't happening at the moment are board-to-board meetings. So when we used to meet them twice a year, at least maybe 3 times a year, as the trust board and the club board, and we'd ask them strategic financial policy issues rather than the more tactical stuff that we can do with department heads and senior executives. They're on hold for now. But as Martin's just referenced, it kind of feels like everyone's pretty much in a holding pattern until the Tracy Crouch review reports. So it is a bit of a waiting game now. Everyone's kind of sussing out what the new landscape will be. So the relationship with the club, because it's multifaceted, it's not just through one person, is still strong, and we still provide a service for our members, and we still obviously help work on various work streams, and we'll do casework for individual fans who are in difficulty, etc. That's all going on business as usual. It's strategic lobbying at a policy level that has paused for now, while the board don't want to get around the table with us.
Kat, just for clear clarity there. So I think I'm coming across someone's mic there, but just so fans are aware with the difference there between, you're saying the board and then the multifacets there. Are we talking about Daniel, Donna? Are we saying that side is where there needs to be work on?
Yeah, so the executive board of Tottenham Hotspur, Daniel, Donna, Rebecca, Matthew, I think, is Todd a non-exec, Martin, or is he now an actual board director? I think he's an actual board director.
I think he's a director now, yeah.
So the five of them effectively. Everybody else would be a departmental head. So the head of stadium director, head of ticketing, supporter liaison officer, all that kind of thing. They're senior execs and departmental heads. So they're the people who we have the good working relationship with on a day-to-day basis, but we always did, because there's always issues coming up. So whether that's away travel, going over to Rennes or going over to Arnhem or wherever, there'll be issues around that. Whether it's ticketing stuff around an ECL or a Carabao Cup, or whether it's trying to put on some subsidised travel for the game up at Burnley when there are no trains back, all that kind of workaday stuff is all still going ahead. It's the strategic high-level lobbying where we would go in and lobby the executive board over their policy decisions that at the moment is on pause. Does that make sense?
That does, Kat. I really appreciate you updating us. Only because, we've got thousands of listeners that listen in. So I think it's great for them to kind of get an insight in the difference there between it. Guys, before we pass over to John, we have got another question coming through on the screen here. And I say, if you guys are comfortable answering this here, this says here, what is the Trust's biggest project at the moment? We understand the opening dialogue to the board, but what will be the biggest question if that dialogue was to open? Kat, Martin, have you got a view on that in terms of what that question would be?
Shall I take that? I mean, the biggest project has been the submission to the fan-led review, pushing for changes at governance at club level and at whole game level. And so the question that will come out of that is, if, for example, they set up an independent regulator, what does independent mean? And who's the regulator going to be? If they establish what's been talked about, which is a golden share, which there'll be certain key decisions like, where the club plays or what the colour of the shirt is, that can only be signed off by the supporters. How's that going to work? So there's a lot of detail. And if we talk about the review later, then I can kind of go into that without boring everybody stupid with the whole thing. But, that's absolutely been the biggest project that we've had. And probably for the past 4 or 5 months, actually, is kind of gathering information, putting the submission together, being invited to make a submission to the review panel itself as well, orally, as well as putting our written evidence forward. And we've had a lot of help from fans who are kind of people who work in governance and in finance and various kind of aspects of running organizations as well, to say what's best practice, what could work, what would apply at a club. So and it's again, I didn't become a football fan necessarily to have some of the discussions that I've had about kind of non-executive directors and dual board structures and whatever. I'm a bit better on overlapping fullbacks and false nines, if you like. But that's taken up a huge amount of time and a huge amount of brain power. And I think there's always, Kat will kill me if I don't say it, but there's always a load of stuff going on with ticketing. And that could be like quite minor individual things, but it mounts up. The amount of casework and the amount of inquiries and various work that we do around ticketing that you just would not believe.
And I would actually say the whole return of fans after the pandemic and trying to live alongside COVID has been massive for us, and it still continues that way. You know, the having to flash out a plan B in case we spike again this Christmas, this winter, who knows what's going to happen. So all of that whole trying to put safety first, but obviously respect the fact that football fans want to get back as soon as possible. And I mean, when you go into the stadium now, it's almost like COVID never happened.
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's
to
strike that balance. And I think the whole COVID passport, the whole digital ticketing move has all been massive as well. So Martin's absolutely right that as a body of work, the submission for the fan-led review was intense. We were summoned by the panel, and that's quite daunting, by the fan-led review panel to give oral evidence. So we had to present to Tracy, the MP, and to the other panel members, and then submit our documentation in writing. That was it. I can't tell you how much work that was. That was a huge amount of work. And we owe a debt of thanks to governance experts who are amongst our trust membership as well. That they were fantastic. We had some fantastic advice on that, really, really helpful. But in terms of ongoing day to day, definitely all the COVID stuff it's been enormous, and stuff that none of us are prepared for.
The mad thing is that it's a fact, right? In the last 18 months, there's been less football, but more work than there's ever been in any time.
That's crazy. That's crazy, isn't it? And you are meant to be fans as well as doing this as voluntary as well. I have to say that these guys are unpaid in terms of what they do, and it's their love for the club. You know, love for trying to see the club get back to where we all want it to be. Fingers crossed one day. A couple of more questions before we do turn to John. I know John's got a question to ask you guys, but one on the screen there from Jordan Hussein, who says, as Paratici is actually our managing director, I presume, Martin, at the moment, there's been no comms with him. I understand he's not done anything at all with the journalists, or, tell me if he has reached out to you at all.
I think if we said we expected to have a chat with Fabio, people would say, I thought you didn't deal with on-pitch matters. And we're certainly not going to sit down and say, listen, Fabio, I've seen this bloke on YouTube that I think you should have a look at. And, we should think about signing him. So
do me a favour, Martin, if you do get to speak to him, can you find out we didn't get that alternative striker, please?
I think, it may, if there is some kind of discussion about strategy, I think it would be useful to hear from the guy who's been appointed to deal with the football, which is what I understand Paratici's role is. But I don't think we're overly concerned that we haven't sat down and had a chat with Paratici, which will come as a shock to all those people out there who think we're a bunch of ego-driven gits, overwhelmed by self-importance, and we just want to sit down and talk to everybody. But I don't think that's the biggest problem at the moment. I understand why the question was asked, but happy to let the football people get on with it, and I think maybe some of the other non-football people could let the football people get on with it a bit more as well. Just leave it.
Kat, in amongst all the actual real issues you've got at the moment with the club that you're trying to get answers for, Adrian wants to know what's happening with the Sky Bar above the Paxton Road stand. Any news on that at all, the Sky Bar?
He's not the only person that wants to know that, because I sit next to a gentleman who's got a fantastic name, and his name is Bruce Lee. What a great name. Hello, Bruce. Yeah. And hey, Bruce asked me this question at the last game, at which point I leant forward to another gentleman called Pete Hain, who just happens to sit in front of me and is also the trust secretary, who knows all this stuff. And he said, yeah, well, they were meant to be developing it, but I'm not sure it's been a priority. It might have been financial, it might have been something else, but it seems to have dropped off the list. But next time we got a home game, I'll lean forward to Pete again, ask him for an update, and I'll let Adrian know.
Appreciate it. I mean, this is the same club as 72-day search for a manager. So I'll be interested to know where that Sky Bar is in terms of the priorities. Let's hand back to John.
I love the way you get asked about the Barlow, Kat.
They know me.
Last minute, never brought around ever in your life.
Martin, coming over to you, as you said in your recent statement, THFC's executive board is clearly not going to resign. You also mentioned that it does not acknowledge that denying involvement at successive board-to-board meetings in a key project it was clearly deeply involved in has undermined confidence in those meetings, and the board has refused to acknowledge the sentiments revealed by the findings of your survey. It's now clear everyone is waiting for the result of the fan-led review, which you touched upon earlier, to be published by Tracy Crouch MP. Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust stopped the club from pushing on with a hastily put together plan to set up a toothless and unrepresentative club advisory panel and attempt to preempt the review. You are hoping, along with other fan groups and the Football Supporters Association, the review embeds fan influence at board level, and you have said clearly that members of the THST board would not be seeking positions on the club board. Realistically, are you able to give us a time frame on when we can expect to see the fan rep installed, or any latest progress on that?
I just want to promise viewers that this is not Enoch that are muting Martin's mic here. We're going to get Martin off mute.
I'm off mute. That's a good way to shut me up. The short answer is that the latest we're hearing about the fan-led review is that it's going to publish its recommendations at the end of this month. And then obviously people will have to see what they are, and we'll look at how long it takes to put those into practice. But realistically, you're looking at, 6 months to a year before you can start putting those structural changes in the way the game is run and the way clubs are run into practice, which won't be great news to everybody because we all want instant change. But that's a realistic answer. I think kind of taking some of the other things in what you just asked, John, is that there's been a lot of toing and froing about us asking for meetings, refusing meetings, or whatever. After we'd been one of the leading trusts in the country asking about involvement in the Super League, and it's something that the FSA flagged up a few years back and said that this is not just another discussion where it ends up with like a couple more group games or Slovenia getting an extra, team in the Champions League. They're really serious about doing something big, which is a breakaway. And so we've been talking to fans. We've been arguing the case against the kind of closed Super League for ages, and we'd asked more questions of our club board than any other fan organisation. That we'd said, "Are you involved?" We know you probably can't talk about detail, but this is something you'd look at. And they'd always said that nothing to see here, and that's it. So the problem we had when it turned out that they had been involved and there was something to see here, and they'd actually announced that they were joining it next week, which is what happened in April, was that if we'd have gone into a meeting with them on the same basis, everybody would have said, well, hold on a minute, they didn't tell you the truth last time, so how can we, what's the point of having a meeting this time? You're a bunch of mugs. And it would have been very difficult to convince, and it still would be, to convince our members that there was a worth to those meetings. Now, we're not sure that the club recognises the damage that it did to the relationship that you've kind of got a base, the trust, if you like, that you've got a base this relationship on. Subsequently to that meeting, we did sit down and meet with the club, right? Which is often being forgotten in a lot of these discussions. And if you go onto our website on the news section and you look at the 20th of May, you'll see a report of that meeting that we had with the club. And one of the things we discussed was this advisory panel, which that they'd never mentioned before. But after there was a massive furore, and not only the Premier League was threatening points deductions and fines and expulsions, but so was UEFA, and the government was saying it was going to get involved, and the Prime Minister said he was going to drop a legislative bomb. That was the quote on the whole game. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that they came up with an idea for some kind of fan consultation, which is a little bit more wide in than it had been before. And we welcomed that. We've been campaigning for changes for years, but we said that, what's happened with the Super League has shown the limitations of the relationship that we've got at the moment. And one of the questions we asked the club about what it proposed, that its own club advisory panel, was, if that was in place, would the Super League have happened? Would you have told us any more? And they said nothing would have been any different, because we still couldn't have told you anything, because the lawyers wouldn't have let us. And we said, well, one of the things we said in our submission is that unless fans can have an influence it takes to go into a completely different competition, any change is worthless. That's one of the kind of major fundamental changes that we'd want there to be some influence over. We've also been really clear that some people said, oh, this is just a power grab by the trust, they want to get on the board. Right? We've never wanted to do that. And in a way, it's much easier for us not to do that. Being a board director of any company, let alone a football club, it's a big job. It needs a particular set of skills. You need that high level business savvy, as well, as I'm sure Lee McQueen will tell you in another episode as well. And you need the football savvy as well. What we're asking for is for the fan view to be taken on board a bit more in there. And as much as the executive board will say that we're fans as well, they're not fans in the same way that we are. And so we want that more grassroots view taken on board. One way of doing that is by non-executive directors. One way of doing that is by having a direct fan rep on the board, but that has to be elected by as big a part of the fan base as possible. The reason that we argued that we should have a number of seats on any panel is because we are the only independent supporter group, at the club. There are other supporter groups that are doing brilliant work, but they're not independent of the club. So there are some things they can't do because otherwise the club will say, they'll cut off the funding or they'll shut them down or whatever. So it's important, we think, for an independent democratic group to have, a little bit of a kind of a weighty representation on the board. But, by no means, we are not the only voice among Spurs fans. I think we all know that. There are other views out there and there are other views that should be heard as well. But, we do say, and we do say if anybody that wants to work with us, let us know who you are. Let us know what your mandate is. Let us know how you're constituted. All of those things, people can see what we're about. We've got nothing to hide at all. But in terms of when we'll get that fan rep, and again, I've seen questions on social media this week, what's happened to the fan rep? Well, the fan rep was never going to be put into place until the review made its report. Could have preempted something. It could have said, let's go forward. With a better plan than is delivered on the review, but they have to be careful not to preempt what's in the review, not to look to try and bump the review into doing a particular thing as well. So all they could have done is said that this is what we would like to do. Let's see how that fits in with what's published. And look, this is fantastic. What we propose is even better than the government's recommending. But it's going to take a while, and there's a bit of fingernail biting. What's going to be said if it's it's the most eagerly awaited document in football, probably since the last transfer window.
Yep. Martin, we really appreciate that update from you there. We really, really do. Guys, for our listeners on audio, we are going to go for a very quick break. When we return, we'll be discussing more on Tottenham Hotspur, of course, with the trust here. We're discussing ticketing. Will Jimmy Greaves get a statue? Lots more in terms of how the club, how these guys here have dealt with, let's say, the COVID impact for fans. It's been a tough time, as we know. We're just still, at the moment, we have to say, still coming out of a pandemic. It's not been easy the last 18 to 24 months. And it's these guys' hard work that is, like I say, slowly getting fans confident enough to go back into that stadium. And, of course, a look ahead to our next Premier League game at the weekend against Newcastle. The irony of them having a takeover at the time we've got the trust on discussing ownership. You couldn't make it up. For our watching audience on YouTube, I think we've had nearly over 250 of you watching us live, like I say, on a Thursday evening. So thank you ever so much for that. We're going to get into that right now. Martin, I'm going to start with you on this particular subject. It is one that I know touches a lot of people's hearts. And, I feel almost unqualified to speak about him, bearing in mind that I wasn't actually, born at the time to see the great man play. But, Jimmy Greaves, I think it's got to be said that it overshadowed everything the last month, his sad death. And not only a club legend, but one of the greatest legends in the game. We saw club and supporters pay their respects on the day of our home game against Chelsea. I think you said in your most recent statement, there are discussions in progress about a more permanent way to mark Jimmy's life. But for now, there is a family, as you said, that's still grieving. As a trust, you're respecting their privacy. But I think one of the key things that has really been one of the things on fans' tongues is this man, in any way, can we get him a statue outside of the club stadium? Is that realistic? As their discussions had any chance with the club? Has that been tentative at all? Can you tell us where that is at the moment?
I think, look, I think you've got to say that Jimmy Greaves, that there's a lot of hyperbole in the game, but he was one of the greatest ever. If you just look at those clips, I'm too young to have seen him play in the flesh, although he did play in the first live game that I ever saw, which was Barnet v Leatherhead in 1977, when he turned out for Barnet for a few games as well. And there was this huge excitement that Jimmy Greaves, was playing up the road from where I lived in Muswell Hill in Barnet. But you look at some of those clips of him on those pitches, and he's just gliding across them, just making people look like fools and just banging goal after goal in. Genuine, one of the great legends in the game. There's a bigger discussion, isn't there? That it was sparked off by Jimmy's death, but how are we marking our history? How are we showing our history as well? And I think it's a kind of classic. There are all opinions available. I saw a particularly heated debate in a couple of days after he died on social media, people saying we need a statue, and then somebody else who's somebody who's on the trust feed quite a lot, a woman called Jill Lewis, who's been supporting a team for so long, just said, like, I bloody hope not, because all those statues look horrible. I think that's like the ground as well. So you're never going to please everybody. I think people want to see a bit more of the club history a bit up front. The club have always said they're not going to do statues. They're not going to do the same kind of memorial as other people. And that's part of, like, we've always got to be one step ahead and do things that are better than other people. They've said that they want it to be kind of a living history. They're going to get the museum, and the museum project is something that we've been pushing them on. I think that they need to take notice that a lot of fans are saying, actually, we want a little bit more than that. Now, it might not be a statue. It might be something else, but I think fans want a little bit more of an upfront offering. But I think that what you have to also recognise this is that, one, Jimmy's family are still grieving at the moment, and but it's the families of a lot of the legends who are still around, who need to be happy with what's going on, and it's really important to them that it's backed officially by the club. And they don't want to be in the middle of an argument between a section of the fans and the club, or a section of the fans and another section of the fans as well. So this stuff, for people go, oh, you're just obfuscating here. It's really sensitive a lot of the time. My view is it would be a good idea for the club to say, you know what, we're going to rethink our attitude to the way that we're marking our legends a little bit. And we're going to come up with something genuinely original, but which will have the support of fans as well, and maybe do a bit of consultation on that. I think that would be a really good way of extending an olive branch, and I think it would mean a lot to a lot of people. I don't agree that there isn't any branding for Spurs around the ground. There's a massive cockerel on a ball on top of the south stand, and if you go all around the inside of the stadium, there's the pictures that are up there, there's a shelf bar, so there are nods to our history, but it's pretty obvious that people want a little bit more. And I think building it around people like, you go into then, who hasn't got a statue, but I think that the names that come to mind are Jimmy Greaves, Bill Nicholson. I would say Arthur Rowe, who's somebody whose cause I've championed for years and have written about as well. Glenn Hoddle, Steve Perryman, people like that, Danny Blanchflower and Dave Mackay. But you've got this list going, and I think part of it is just that, well, how many statues are there going to be room for as well? I think they could come up with something that pleased fans, that made people feel a little bit better, that made them identify with things, and that showed that they were listening. And I think that's a relatively easy thing to do. But you've always got to think about the surviving families of those stars as well. Bill Nick's family are still around, and I mean, John White's son is on our board as well. So there's a connection with that team. And Rob is a fantastic guy. He's great to work with. He's great to watch a game of football with as well. But you sit down and listen to the stories that he's got about the club and the various figures in there. It's absolutely fascinating. So I think there's, if somebody from the club is listening, there's an opportunity here to maybe kind of, extend some olive branches and to say, look, actually we're listening, and maybe we're going to change the way we originally thought we were going to do things.
Martin, who would that sort of dialogue come through? I'm just thinking about that now. Would it come through the sort of Tottenham Tribute Trust and that sort of direction, who would liaise directly with players, for ex-players' families?
Yeah, I mean,
the Tribute Trust do deal with players who are in times of hardship, and then they probably would deal with families of players who passed away as well. So yes, maybe. Us as a trust, though, we have had the conversation about statues and about heritage and about marking our history in several board-to-board meetings over the past 7 or 8 years, particularly when we were moving towards the new stadium build. So it's not something that hasn't been on our radar. It has been on our radar. We're very fortunate on our board to have Pete Hain, who's our secretary, who is also an ambassador for the foundation, and he was also on what the club established, and I think it was called a heritage committee. So he is fed into these ideas as well, and he's very hot on this. And as Martin also mentioned, John White's son, Rob, who's on our board, obviously the heritage and history of the club mean the world to him. So we've got two very strong advocates there in Rob and Pete. So they would have dialogue with Levi Harris, who's our supporter liaison officer initially, probably going into Donna Maria Cullen ultimately, who is the executive director on the board. So we can also lobby for things like that. It wouldn't necessarily have to go through the TTT, although they would be the people who would be directly in touch, unless there was a specific project that the trust was working on, in which case we'd obviously be in touch with the family of a player or the player as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you, Kat. Thanks for clearing that up. Kat or Martin, for this one, after 30 years of campaigning by fan groups, standing is once again to be permitted at top-flight stadia in England and Wales. The Supporters Trust has backed the campaign for many years and was instrumental in persuading an initially sceptical Tottenham Hotspur Football Club to back it. The club has announced it will be applying to be one of the pilot clubs to offer safe standing from the 1st of January 2022, But in its excitement, it appeared to forget to acknowledge the role played by fans and the trust itself. How excited are you after all the hard work and campaigning you've personally put in for something that looks like it's now going to become a reality?
I'll start on this one. Obviously delighted. There's been a lot of hard work that's gone in by a lot of people, but I do need to mention two. There's a gentleman called Pete Dakin, who has literally led the Football Supporters Association work on this for many, many, many years, and he deserved hundreds of pints of congratulations for this latest development. So Pete Dakin, well done. And then the second person I should shout out is one of our former Trust board members, who was a guy called Paul Head, and he was on our board for 3 or 4 years, and he spearheaded our campaigning work for the club to adopt an approach that was agreeable to safe standing. So Paul presented to Daniel Levy and to Donna years ago, probably like 2014 or so, and then arranged for the safe standing roadshow to come in and show them how it all worked. He really was instrumental. He was the energy and like the engine at the trust for this. So thank you, Paul. That was amazing work as well. We've always been supportive of the choice to stand, so it's great that that's now becoming a reality. But of course, we now need to focus on what it means practically. And also, we've been contacted by fans who don't want to stand and are concerned about how disruptive this change might be to their match day experience. There's also been some confusion around whether or not it might mean increased capacities or reduced ticket pricing, neither of which is on the table. It's not a return to old style terracing. You will still have your space and your seat. It's just that there'll be a bar in front of it, basically. So same capacity, probably the same pricing. So there we go. So for the practicalities, Martin is our representative on Haringey's Safety Advisory Group. And I know they had a special meeting recently around the safe standing changes. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add in terms of practicalities and what fans might expect or how that's going to be managed in our stadium, Martin?
Not a huge amount. I mean, I think that the point you made that it's a conversation that we had in the last few years of the campaign. It's not a return to the old kind of terracing. So the safe standing areas will need to be licensed as part of the safety licenses given to the football ground. And the things they're looking at is that can people migrate in and out of that section? You won't be able to migrate in and out of that section. You're still going to have a ticket and a named number for your seat. And as Kat said, you'll stand in front of your seat with a bar there. I think one of the things that we'll look at and we'll try and work with the club as much as we can with, and we've already had conversations with the support liaison officer and the stadium director and asked about stewarding as well, is that one of the dangers was that the safety authorities would say, now that you've got a standing section, everywhere else, everybody has to sit down all the time. And we'd be back to the same kind of argument. So one of the problems with the old legislation was that it said persistent standing isn't permitted. So we said, well, what's persistent standing? Is it 15 minutes or is it 12 minutes or is it 18 minutes or, what was it? What is it? Right? Is it all at once or is it aggregated through the game? We don't have to go into those arguments again in other parts of the ground. And so that they have this great phrase which says that we recognize that fans will stand up in moments of excitement. And we'll say, well, there's not been a lot of them lately. But so it's trying to make sure that there's still a sensible approach, but that also the people who don't want to stand up or who can't stand up are able to watch the game and don't get told that they're not real fans and that they're shit and this, that, and the other, which does happen as well. And the stewards do have a really difficult job. And I know sometimes some of the stewarding staff don't help themselves, and there's all kind of approaches with all sorts of people, but sometimes some fans don't help themselves either with that. And what we need to do is have a little bit of a sensibility that there used to be, if you want to call it, in the old days when everybody pretty much was standing up. But if somebody behind you said, look, sorry, do you mind like moving aside or just sitting down a bit because I actually can't stand up, I've got a bad leg or something like that, people would just do it because they had a bit of respect for each other, and we're all fans and we want to watch the game. So there's going to be bits of that as well. I'm sure there's going to be arguments about who's in the standing sections and how you're able to get there, and it's going to take a little bit of settling down as well. But I think it is going to be a great thing. It's a massive pity that it's not going to mean a reduction in prices, because they certainly use it as an excuse to put the bloody prices up when they put the seats in as well. But that was a battle that was lost quite a few years ago, and the choice that the supporters groups had was to say, well, do we keep pushing for it anyway, or do we chuck it all out the window because it doesn't look like there's going to be, reduced prices in there? I think we might have an argument if they decide it's a premium experience and it's more expensive. So that could be an interesting argument. But that's the kind of thing that we would need to both have a conversation with the departmental heads about and also lobby at board level about an executive decision. So that's how it fits together.
Appreciate it, guys. I'm conscious of time because we do want to obviously discuss Newcastle as well at the weekend to come. So we're going to try and rattle through the next few questions. Kat, you recently represented the THST meeting on the 9th of September between the club fan reps and the Premier League, organised by the FSA on issues around COVID. Fan reps were looking for more clarity and informity around status checks, better, clearer communication, a better balanced, fair access and creating safe environments. I think that session covered COVID checks, communication, consultation, future certificate plans, impact on supporters, match day experience, transmission rates and plans for the future. God, it feels like you're doing a lot here, Kat. Are you able to give us a summary of how that meeting went? What came out of that, Kat?
Okay, so yes, I wasn't actually a THSD rep on that. I am a network rep.
Okay.
For the League at the Football Sports Association. So I was in there. When you go into those meetings with the Premier League, you're like club agnostic. You're there representing the division. So I might have to argue for, I don't know, Wolves fans or whatever, and it's just what you do. So I normally lead on broadcast and a few other bits and bobs, maybe some ticketing thrown in there as well. These meetings have been going on since 2016 after the last expert working group. They're part of a process called structured dialogue. So the Premier League agrees to meet with the FSA and fan reps twice a year in a similar way that we would meet with the club board twice a year. So at least they're still honouring their commitment, which is all good. Yes, this was the 10th one that we've had. I think I've probably been to 9 of them. It's an opportunity for the senior Premier League executives to hear from fan reps, and it's an opportunity for fan reps to talk to senior Premier League executives as well. Anybody who's interested in the actual meat of the meeting, the FSA have now published a full report. It's on their website. We will link it in our October newsletter as well, so you can have a read as to what was discussed. But the stuff that you mentioned around COVID and how the Premier League will deal with that, around match day experience and transmission rates, all that kind of thing, that's massive for them. We also, ironically, led with them being late with the November TV announcement, how it wasn't good enough, how we made them commit to a six-week deadline. Basically, they need to confirm those TV picks 6 weeks in advance. So that was something that we, as the FSA, pushed them to commit to. And we'd ideally want 3 months because that's when you can get cheaper train tickets. But being realistic, 6 weeks was a good compromise. They obviously missed their November deadline, so we hauled them over hot coals for that. Richard Masters, he's the big cheese at the Premier League, was like, my God, I'm so sorry. Completely understand the impact on fans. And I think I said to them, you said that fans are so intrinsic to your product and you'd really missed us during the pandemic and all the stuff behind closed doors and how grateful you were to have us back. And then within like a month, you've broken your own deadline and just shown that you don't give a toss about fans anymore. So he was very, very apologetic, promised it wouldn't happen again. Here we are. Where are the December picks? They were due out on Monday.
We're waiting. I'm still waiting. We've got a podcast rotor to sort. I know the feeling, Kat. We're waiting as well.
So we talk about things like that. So they're normally well-mannered but quite feisty affairs, and the fan reps who are selected to go in and represent the division normally get stuck in. So so the minutes of the meeting probably won't reflect the feistiness, but I think they're productive on both sides. Look, we tell them what they don't want to hear and what they do want to hear on some occasions, and they tell us that they're going to do better next time, and then invariably don't.
On broadcast, Pat, can I ask a question? When are you going to get your finger out? Why haven't you solved it?
Exactly. Sorry, guys.
Let's hand back to John.
Kat, with regards to the ECL and Premier League away match ticketing, we understand you were pleased that your lobbying of the club or the trust lobbying of the club to offer a group stage package for home games in the Europa Conference League and for matches to be priced accessibly was successful. Offering a package is kind of a rare example of the club offering a progressive pricing deal. And of course, it should also help boost attendances. Pricing individual games more accessibly by keeping them out of a match day categorisation also helps bring more lower income fans into the ground. And you also lobbied successfully for each game to be worth 3 loyalty points, for each game that fans attend in person. Do you see that scheme continuing throughout the competition, or do you get the feeling that's kind of a one-off just while the group stage is going on, and then they'll revert to type once the knockouts start later in the competition? Because I remember, priced well, we got 80,000, a record in the Europa League for Ghent, at Wembley, which is incredible. And that was through work of the trust. So I just want to say thanks for that and to ask you guys to carry on.
£5.
Yeah, it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I then did spend probably 8 weeks dealing with people who were like, but I haven't been given my loyalty points, and I was definitely I didn't scan, and I don't know what the problem is. And so then it was like, well, did you buy anything in the stadium? Oh, yeah, I bought a pie. How did you pay for it? Cash. Did you buy anything on a credit card? Great. Can I have your statement, please? Literally, it was a nightmare trying to appeal all these cases with the club to get people's ticketing points added on, because they had actually been at the game and their tickets hadn't scanned. Anyway, to answer your question, there obviously won't be a group stage pack for knockout games. That would be a little bit optimistic. But we'd continue to lobby for games to be kept out of categorisation and for concessions to apply throughout the ground and for family packs to be offered and that kind of thing. I think it's really important that they maintain that policy and that approach if we're fortunate enough to progress deep into the competition. Actually, in the club's defence, the cup competitions, so forget Champions League, but the Europas and the FA Cup and the League Cup have been competitions that we've worked on pricing with them for 8 or 9 years now, and we convinced them to keep the majority out of categorisation because it's obviously much cheaper and more accessible to give people a chance who can't afford to go to Premier League games or who might want to take their kids along for a one-off, etc., etc. And they've bought into that. So the accessible cup pricing policy is something that they're also quite proud of. So I'm optimistic that they'd still keep that pricing out of categorisation. It might go up from what it has been, which was like 50 quid for 3 games or whatever, but I would expect it to still be really reasonably priced. And hopefully the same would happen for the FA Cup if we got a home game, or maybe even the Carabao if we get through to the next round. So always watch out for those cup competitions, because when they start tipping into categorisation, that's when we go mad at them. And then people will say, but they've made it a Cat C, what's the problem? And we'll go, because we have an arrangement with them. That's the problem. So there you go.
We'll keep our eyes on that, Kat. We'll keep our eyes on that. We're going to try and rattle through the next two to try and head towards a Newcastle preview. Kat, this one is geared towards you again. You mentioned in your recent statement that you continue to press the club to reverse its unfair refusal to offer concessionary pricing on the official ticket exchange platform TEX. Until 2020, fans who qualified for a concessionary price were able to pay that price for tickets they purchased on TEX. But the club now insists all tickets on TEX are sold at full price. Is there any further comment you want to make on that regarding this? I know you obviously went into quite a lot of depth on this on the actual latest update on the THSC Trust. Anything you want to say on that, Kat?
Yeah, it's been in quite a few newsletters, and the last time we were physically in a meeting with the board, so pre-pandemic, it was a big heated discussion as well. There's no movement from the club side. We'd encourage fans who are affected by that decision to email the club directly and let them know their thoughts. We firmly believe that if someone has a junior or a senior membership, and if seats are available at concessionary prices in that part of the stadium, normally they should qualify for concessionary prices on ticket exchange. The club's position is that they'd lose money from the adult sellers who would expect, quite rightly, the full amount of money back if that ticket sold on exchange, and then concessions would pay concessionary pricing, meaning the club would bridge the shortfall. But it also works in reverse. And being honest, the figures are so tiny that it's just nonsensical. It leaves a bad taste in the mouth, especially when the club promotes the ticket exchange as a source for One Hotspur members to buy their tickets. It just doesn't sit well with us. So yes, basically, we're making as much noise on it as we can. We think it's a really unfair decision, and we think the financial impact is minimal, and it's the right thing to do. But we need other people to also write to the club and express those thoughts as well. So you can either drop a line to ticket.office@tottenhamhotspur.com or supporter services at tottenhamhotspur.com and just say that you don't think it's right that there are no concessions available on TEX ticket exchange. Thank you.
Martin, coming over to you now. The weekend just passed has seen lots of talk surrounding the NFL and non-footballing events at the stadium. Commercially, they're excellent. Me personally, I want the stadium used every day. Tottenham aren't using it for something else. I think it brings good money to the local economy, but I know that's not a view that's shared by all. Do you feel it's less about the events and more about where the money generated goes? Does it simply go into servicing the debt taken out against the club?
I hope it does go into servicing the debt taken out against the club, because we can pay it off sooner. And I think probably like most fans, I don't have a huge problem if money that's used from other events at the stadium goes into the footballing side as well, as kind of covers the cost for them. But that's one of the reasons that we're asking for a bit more transparency, on the accounts. I think people would like a bit more reassurance that, we're hearing a lot about, NFL and the Joshua fight and contents or whatever, but is that money something that is being used to, stop the club getting into debt in future? Is it money that's going to go into the footballing side of the club, or potentially maybe cheaper ticket prices in future? That's probably a little bit too much to hope for, isn't it, as well? So I hope it is. I think there's an issue around the events, and I think it's tricky because we're a supporters trust, but I think that it's difficult for the people who live around the stadium, because it's now not just a game every fortnight or maybe a game every week. That there's a lot more events that are on. And I think that there's some kind of concerns being raised about that. And obviously we'd kind of hope that the club, tries to be as good a neighbour to its neighbours as it wants as well. So there's that side of the extra events at the stadium that are being brought in. But, I know that this is something that there's a huge amount of controversy about, but I honestly think that most people's view is that if it gets the name of the club out there, and if it generates income from the club, then it's a good thing. And, personal view, if the club shop is full of NFL merchandise on a day when there's an NFL game on at the stadium, I don't think that's a massive issue. It's an issue if it's full of NFL merchandise on every other day, and the football club suddenly doesn't seem to matter. But that isn't the case, at all. It's still there. So, but I think that kind of question is as much about showing people that this great new stadium that we've got and the events around it are benefiting the football club. I think that's what people want a bit more reassurance about. And that's, again, not saying open up all the books and let every fan go through the accounts. That's just saying give them a bit of an explanation about the way the cash flows around, the way it moves between different parts of the organisation.
Martin, thank you for that. Guys, thank you so much for all the answers to these questions so far. We're going to steer away from talking, like I say, in terms of the in-depth we've done tonight, in terms of the board, in terms of the questions. We hope, guys, for you listening, for you watching, that's answered a lot of questions that's come up over the course of the last month or two. We've tried our best to continue to try and get Kat and Martin on fairly frequently this season to kind of get a lot of these questions answered. I think it's fair to say, again, it's not been the easiest of time for our great guys at the Trust. Martin and Kat, I have to kind of make this point, they do this voluntarily. They do this because they are fans of the football club that want to see the club ultimately performing well on the pitch. They want to make sure fans do have that great experience. And I know, hopefully I speak on behalf of a lot of our members at Last Word on Spurs. I'm sure John as well, that, without Kat and Martin, they've done such a huge amount of work that goes into the club. I don't think people actually realise, I say this all the time, the amount of work that goes into the club. Before we obviously close the show, we'll obviously explain how you can become obviously a member of the Trust. We'll get Kat to obviously explain that to you. But we are going to go for our final break of the show. Taking into this break, we're going to hear from Anna from Spurs XY, who gives us an update on the Spurs women. We've also got a couple of Newcastle previews as well. And then when we come back, we're also, like I say, having a quick 5-10 minute chat on Newcastle United at the weekend, who in certain terms have hit the jackpot. But for our audience watching on YouTube, thank you so much. We're going to get into that right now. Now, I do want to start by saying that with regards to the Newcastle takeover, there's obviously a lot of ethical discussions currently ongoing around the takeover. I want to say that we're not trying to ignore or disregard what is going on around that takeover, but we are here, from our perspective here, purely to discuss this from a footballing perspective. Now, Martin, Kat, feel free, guys. Whoever wants to take this question first. I mean, it has been a crazy week up on Tyneside, right? I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen Sky Sports News. You've seen the reaction down there. I know a man they've wanted out for, I think, over 14 years in Mike Ashley. They have got their wish, and they've all now become overnight the richest club in the world, which is quite weird. I'm waking up seeing headlines of Newcastle, challenging for a title, challenging for a Champions League, buying some of the best players in the world. I mean, given the irony, Martin, I'll start with you, that the subject of the show has been mainly about the ownership of a football club. What have you made of this takeover at St James's Park, and how do you see it's actually impacting Spurs on the pitch, given that we were one of the clubs reportedly, I have to use that word, reportedly against this?
Yeah, I mean, that there's been lots of rumours about Spurs and Liverpool, and it probably leading amongst the so-called Big Six as well in this. I don't know how much of that is true, how much of that is part of the kind of games that are being played by Amanda Staveley and the Public Investment Fund, and in their battle with the Premier League as well. We don't know about that. I do know that apparently our chairman Daniel is very annoyed that there were kind of discussions at the Premier League, and it seems that less than the full information was given, and he's quite annoyed about that. Now, I can't imagine a similar situation to that, or how annoying that would be, really. But so there's another irony there. That Newcastle are obviously going to be contenders, aren't they? So that's an issue. There's more people in there, but I think that the two things that I keep coming back to are fans don't get to choose their owners. They've obviously got choices about their owners, but I don't think that supporting your football club necessarily means you have to support your owners. But that's a discussion for Newcastle fans to have. I've got an issue, and I've got an issue with it with Man City as well, with countries being allowed to buy football clubs. And I'm sorry, but Newcastle has been bought by a country. Just because they've called it something else, and the same people who run the country also run the Public Investment Fund, doesn't mean it's not being run by a country. And so there's that competitive imbalance in there, again, that we heard about at the start of it, that City and Newcastle in the English Premier League are now going to have loads more money than anybody else, even Abramovich, right? So that's going to be an issue. But I guess in terms of, we're talking about football, is the money going to be spent wisely? Well, that's the big question, isn't it? You've still got to make the right choices on recruitment. You've still got to make the right choices on how you run your club. So we'll see how it goes. But for me, I think Newcastle, the whole concept of the club has now changed, hasn't it? As well, that I think kind of people's attitude to the club has changed as well, and a lot of their fans will say that's absolutely great. I think it's going to be probably a bit of a circus, if I'm going to be honest, on Sunday, that game, isn't it? It's going to be up there as well. So, and look, I think we are the bit part players, 3,000 fans stuck a couple of miles up in the air, on top of the stand, looking at adverts for Flannel's menswear shop. You're a bit closer than the players on the pitch. So there's not the Spurs haven't really got a big part to play in this weekend. But the long term consequences. And I think, again, people are looking at football governance, and they're looking at, has the Premier League got any power? What kind of competition do we want? How are we protecting our assets? Because one thing that Newcastle was that it was probably one of the last examples of, if you were born in or around Newcastle, you were a Newcastle fan 99 times out of 100. And there's that kind of identity of a kind of club and a locality as well. Is that going to be the same when they're a global brand? Is it inevitable? But there's a lot of kind of other discussions around this as well. But it would be us that's playing them this weekend.
You can't make it up. I mean, I speak to so many people. Normally with Spurs, it's either a new manager bounce we're facing, but this is a new one even for us. A takeover bounce. When have we ever experienced this? Couldn't make it up. John, let's come around to you very quickly just to get your thoughts. And I know we're pushed for time. I'm going to try and squeeze it all in the next 5 minutes. John, thoughts on that Newcastle takeover for you, and how that impacts Spurs generally in terms of the Premier League in the next couple of years? Do you see Newcastle becoming a force quickly, or is it going to be done over time like we saw with City, where it did take, I would say, a 3 to 4 year period for them to actually become title challengers as such?
Yeah, I think it will certainly be done over time. This idea that you can just spend straight away is just false. You need to secure, your balance sheets within financial fair play. They'll need to secure multiple and lucrative sponsorship deals. I don't imagine, the deals they've got at the moment rank anywhere near the current top 6, top 8. So they'll need to review all of those sort of deals to show where the money's coming from as a legitimate source before they can go out and spend. The targets they've been looking at, the likes of James Tarkowski from Burnley, the fact they haven't sacked Steve Bruce because they haven't got anyone lined up, shows you that, look, fans getting excited editing images of Mbappe and Haaland, it just doesn't work like that. It's not Football Manager, it's real life. There's a lot that goes on in a football club and processes. And I think the new owners have made reference that they want to show respect to certain people at the club. I don't know how true that is and whether that's just getting that out there in the media. But I certainly think it will take a long time for Newcastle to be successful, even more than Manchester City and Chelsea, because at the end of the day, international players especially, they like playing in London. They'll go to Manchester, Liverpool at a push, but Newcastle's at another level up, you know. I used to know somebody that was a scout for Sunderland, and he told me the great difficulty he had actually in convincing players to come up there, you know, especially when, as I said, when they come from abroad, starting their life up there. It's a big move. And I think Newcastle will have difficulty convincing players to actually make that move. So I think it's certainly a long-term project for them.
Kat, let's come over to you. Feel free to give your thoughts on this takeover, but also just in terms of Nuno. Ironically, the last time we spoke, Kat, about Nuno, Spurs were top of the Premier League. He was unbeaten. You know, it was a good start. I think we all felt that, you know, there was going to be bumps ahead. I think only at Tottenham can we be in a situation where we get 3 straight wins. The manager gets manager of the month, and then the next month we want to sack him. It just as Spurs fans, we are a very special bunch of fans. I'm not saying that's everybody that wants to sack him. I'm just kind of like to say more out of sarcasm there, just putting that picture out there. But Kat, what's your thoughts on the current situation around the manager, Newcastle, and thoughts going into this weekend? Is he under pressure, Nuno, for you?
Not massively. I think my overwhelming emotion towards Nuno is probably sympathy. I'm like, if we seriously sacked him, who are we going to get in? We went through everybody that was possible to come. And his window just gone. So I think he's going to be there. And I think he's going to be there for certainly the rest of this season. Then we'll see where we are. I don't think he's the issue. Put it that way.
Okay.
So, you know, I did a little personal Twitter poll, actually, about whether you were Nuno in, Nuno out, or the problem is above him. And the majority was the problem is above him. So, you know, I like the man. I think that he's the answer. Do I think he's going to take us to the promised land? No. Do I know what the option is? No. Do I think that there are bigger issues? Yes. So let's just see. I still think we'll get a result actually on Sunday, because they're not going to turn into a decent team overnight. So we've still got a chance. And that's not because we beat City at the start of the season with all.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and I think you're right.
So.
I think looking at the game in more detail, Kat, like you said there, I think the fact that Steve Bruce is still there, it's quite funny. I think having got rid of Ashley, I think Bruce going would have actually been the icing on the cake. But by the fact that he's still going to be there, and as we understand, he's going to be in the press conference for you listening or watching this on Friday morning, as we understand, Bruce will be attending his press conference at 1:30 on Friday. Martin, how do you see Spurs going into that game? Are we going there as real party poopers? Can you see Spurs getting a result there? Because you feel... like Kat says there, for her, she thinks Nuno will be there to the end of the season. I look at this as being a real crucial month for Nuno. He's got, obviously, this game against Newcastle, and we've got West Ham, obviously we've got Burnley in the Cup, we've got Manchester United as well. And I think, obviously, I think you guys also know this, but of course you would know this, but, you know, Pochettino, when we sacked Maurizio, it was just actually in the November international break. We made that change just before, again, a transfer window. Do you think, Martin, Nuno will get at least the end of the season? What's your thoughts at the moment in terms of Nuno and how the season's begun under him?
I think he probably will, partly because I'm not sure who else they would get in. And, you know, they went through that whole search. And I think that, you know, fans always used to say, oh, look, don't worry, Spurs are a massive club. No manager will turn the chance down. And I think managers have turned the chance down now. That's the unfortunate reality. And you have to ask the people running the club, you know, how they assess that. That's one of the questions we're asking. And if that's on pitch, yes, it's on pitch, but it's an important question. It's strategy. And it's what you'd ask in any business. So how we'll go into... I think we probably should get a result, because I don't think we've got a bad football team. We haven't got the best football team, and we've got issues with depth in some positions, but we've got a good football team. There's question marks about how creative... I don't think he's just defensive, as some people say he is. I don't think he's a Mourinho Mark II, but I can see where the comparisons are. There's an issue with creativity in the middle of the pitch. You know, we've never really replaced Eriksen, and it doesn't seem to be a decision really. You know, if it's supposed to be Ndombele, is he the creative pivot? You know, there's still issues around fitness and confidence at that game at the moment. But we should have beaten when they beat us at our place, shouldn't they? So, you know,
yeah, so true.
I think we'll probably get a result, but that's probably me being an arrogant Cockney git, isn't it? You know, which would be the headlines in the Newcastle Evening Post or whatever it is.
I also think it would be hilarious to go up there and when this is around there.
Wouldn't it? Yeah, yeah. Well,
Brilliant.
by judging by the Newcastle fans I've spoken to this week, they're actually doing something very special, a presentation, like as a ceremony beforehand. So,
We're definitely losing then.
Oh, I'll tell you, it would be amazing to get a result up there. I just think maybe, did you know the thing that's holding me in good stead? The fact that Bruce might still be in charge is giving me massive confidence that we may get a result there. It sounds even bizarre that, I think if the caretaker was in charge, John, I can see you want to come in there. I think I'd be more concerned, but the fact Bruce is still there, John, I feel very confident. Don't ask me why.
Yeah. Newcastle fans have wanted Bruce out for a very, very long time, and him just not being in the dugout, whoever was in there, they could have got, Warren Barton out in the tie and suit and got him on the touchline. Their fans would have galvanised behind that, and it would have been an intense, hot atmosphere. The fact they've still got him there, it sort of takes the light off the takeover a little bit. We have got the three world-class players on the pitch in Hugo Lloris, Harry Kane, Heung-min Son. I expect us to get the job done up at Newcastle.
Yeah.
No excuses.
Okay. Well, we wouldn't normally ask Cat and Martin for this, but it is on the eve of a game, so I am bound to do this and ask for predictions. Let's go to you first, Cat. Prediction for Newcastle, what are you going to give us?
3-1 Tottenham.
3-1 Tottenham. This is what an international break has done to us. We're all being revived again now. Let's go to you next, Martin. What are you going for?
2-1 to Tottenham. Go on.
2-1 to Tottenham. And John?
We'll go goal down first, obviously.
We'll come back from a goal. I think that'll finish us if we go a goal down. Listen, I'd love to think we will, but there you go. John, what are you going for?
I think Steve Bruce being there will be a sideline and a distraction for Newcastle. I think we'll win comfortably. I'm going to go 3-0 Tottenham.
Wow, 3-0 Tottenham. Okay, I'm going to go for 2-1 Spurs. Listen, we'll have a full house there. And before we close the show, Kat, I just want to finally say, finding that the forum, this THSD forum, is still the place to go for the more detailed debate and information on trust activities. I think it's fair to say this month has seen lively threads on the ticketing issues, commemorating our club legends, and of course the direction of the club, which you guys are still fully committed to try and getting those answers for. We have to say this forum is open to full members and may have well answered to issues, the questions that you may have. Can you remind our audience and listeners on how they can become a member of the trust?
I can indeed, Ricky. Thank you so much for asking. So if you go to our website, which is www.thstofficial.com, there's a tab across the top that says membership. So that's /membership. So if you visit that website, you will see there's a big button that says join here. So you can either join as a full member, as an adult for £10 a year, as a senior concession for £5 a year, as a junior, totally free. Or as an associate membership, which is our free strand of membership. You obviously have access to the forum and access to newsletters and slightly more stuff if you take the paid option, but we welcome free members as well. So yes, that's how you do it. So go to our website, click the join here button, and there you go. Set yourself an account. Really easy. You can even sign up to direct debit. There you go. You've
just reminded me, Kat. I've got an email that's come through. I need to renew my membership, and I will be doing that now. Duty bound as I'm on it. There's no chance I can be seeing you next time and I've not renewed that membership, so I need to do that ASAP. Finally, John, before we let you go, John, of course, you're running that great podcast over at Lilywhite Rose in terms of our youth. Please tell our listeners where you can find that quickly, John, if we can.
Yeah, just on Apple or Spotify or Google, Lilywhite Rose Youth Podcast, The Stars of Tomorrow Today. I just try and give a short, I know there's not a market for another hour-long podcast out there, so just a short 20-minute bite-sized update on what's going on with the youth, games, results, any contract news I hear, and international call-ups for our young players. So it's been really well received so far, so thank you so much, guys, and just keep on letting me know your listener questions and I'll get them answered on the show.
Yeah, I must say that at this time with the current first team, I know some people are disillusioned with that. Sometimes it is nice to go and hear about the youth and what's going on. So please go and check that out. Kat, Martin, I'm going to have to say this and emphasise this. There's been loads of lovely comments coming in tonight. Thank you for all your hard work. Again, we echo that. We love having you guys on. Keep up the wonderful work. Again, I have to put this point out that Kat and Martin, it's voluntarily. They're not paid to do what they do in terms of trying to galvanise this club back to some kind of understanding where fans feel part of this. So again, Kat, Martin, I thank you so much for all the work you're doing. We love having you on always, and we look forward to having you on next time where hopefully there's better news to report, but always insightful. Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. There you go. The wonderful Kat Martin from the Tottenham Hotspur Trust, John from Lilywhite Rose. Guys, most importantly, please all keep safe, keep well, and as always, come on you Spurs.